Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Wednesday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 8th day of June 2022. I'm David Percy, and the first graphic we've got today is a fire weather update. And for today, Wednesday, June 8th, saw a few thunderstorms along the Alaska Range and over southwest Alaska. Otherwise, it's dry, breezy again for the northern and western interior, along with very dry fuels and cool, showery over south central Alaska and the Panhandle. But there was some sunshine breaking out as well in between this widely scattered showers. And the outlook coming up, periods of rain and seasonable temperatures from south central Alaska to the southeast Panhandle. Driest for the eastern interior with locally gusty winds possible. And from there, taking a look at today's fire danger chart for grass, quite a sharp delineation from the low fire danger to the extreme fire danger, quite evident there from near Eagle along the Yukon River, then extending southwestward, cutting right across the almost the boundary of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta out to the coastline there. And quite an area of extreme fire danger along the lower mid and lower, or actually the lower Yukon River Valley to the Delta there for grass, and that extends on up into the Koyukuk and western Yukon Flats area, and also around Norton Bay, some extreme fire danger with very high fire danger for grass over the southern two-thirds of the Seward Peninsula, all of the northwest interior, western North Slope, and the western Brooks Range area. And moving on to the breakup map. All the rivers now have gone through breakup. Still some ice in the lower end of the Colville, Kapparik, and Sag rivers there, but nothing that's going to cause any ice jam. So breakup is essentially over even for those North Slope rivers for 2022. Satellite imagery showing system spinning there west of the Queen Charlotte Islands. That's actually moving westward now. That's spun a narrow band of showers up across the Panhandle today from south to north, spreading up to just south of Juneau, and then some partly sunny skies for the Haines area up to Skagway. A lot of sunshine breaking out, as you can see, over the Gulf of Alaska and the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and the low clouds giving way to afternoon sunshine, Cook Inlet, Madawaska-Sitna Valley. Clouds over the Kenai Peninsula, but a lot of sunshine in the interior, especially the western interior, with temperatures in the mid-70s. Warmest temperature at 2 p.m. this afternoon. Marshall with 75 degrees. Area 70-degree weather now, kind of getting suppressed to the southwest as cooler temperatures roll in from the north. There you can see band of clouds on the IFR. Fragments of clouds, not really a solid band there, dropping onto the north slope. And north winds right into the central interior today, keeping it kind of cool in the Fairbanks area. In the lower 60s at mid-afternoon there, and in the 20s along the Arctic coast, central and western Arctic coast, with lower to mid-30s for the west side. And some moisture with some scattered showers over the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, down to the eastern Aleutians, but really no organized storms again seen even close to Bering Sea or the Aleutians, with another couple of light wind days coming up for that entire area out west there. As well as interior Alaska, not really looking too windy. Windiest areas will be on the western Arctic coast, western Brooks Range area down through the Bering Strait, as it has been the last couple of days. On the chart, there's that trough that brought the showers to the spreading northward across the southeast coast today, and some more showers down towards Dixon Entrance in the southern areas, and another front to the southwest of that, with that 988 millibar low that's still well off the coast, actually pulling westward, so that's going to make it tough for that front to make landfall at all. Otherwise, a weak thermal low more or less over the Cook Inlet area. A few isolated showers kicking off western Cook Inlet. Talkeetna is up into the eastern Alaska Range, but nothing to the extent we saw yesterday. And some areas of light snow, eastern Arctic coast, even Point Lay had some very light snow flurries at times today, along with some clearing there with the gusty winds, and some light snow reported on the Tuvik Pass earlier today. Otherwise, a lot of sunshine and a little cooler again, the central and northern interior with the 70s now down over the Kuskokwim Valley onto the southwest out toward Norton Sound area, and less in the way of low clouds over the northern Bering Sea. For tonight, not much change. Scattered showers, another band of showers developing, moving westward. May get into Cook Inlet, might hang up over the mountainous terrain, the Chugach Mountains and the Talkeetnas, but some of that could spill into the Cook Inlet area. Madawaska-Sitna Valley back up to the northeast, but nothing too terribly heavy. And that band over the northern panhandle today shifts over toward Yakutat for some moisture there overnight tonight. No change out to the west, no change up to the north, and that front stays off the coast well to the southwest of the panhandle. Then it makes a jog to the east, but to the south now, pushing in across the Queen Charlotte Islands and Vancouver Island. Could nudge some moisture for some rain up into the southern panhandle. Otherwise, kind of a cloudy, mostly cloudy, showery day for the southeast coast. And more clouds and showers, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, scattered afternoon thunderstorms over the mountainous terrain, but mostly sunny, northern interior. And Arctic front spread some snow southward to the eastern central Arctic coast. And for Friday, a chance of snow in the north slope and chance of showers over the panhandle and south central Alaska. Lows tonight in the 20s, north slope and Brooks Range, otherwise 40s and lower 50s. Highs tomorrow, 70s over the southwest interior, 60s, lower to mid 60s for the Tanana Valley, and lower 30s for the Arctic coast. Lows the following morning about the same as what they'll be tomorrow morning, followed by highs a little cooler.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to flying weather, IFR, central eastern Arctic coast, otherwise VFR from the Brooks Range on down into south central Alaska, Togiak Bay, northern Bering Sea, and Kodiak Island, all VFR. Band of IFR swinging west-northwest along the eastern Arctic coast across the Gulf there, affecting Yakutat and northern Lynn Canal Glacier Bay areas, with marginal VFR spreading into Prince William Sound and the Wrangell Mountains, and in Passage Canal, possibly to Portage, the east end of Turnagain Arm. IFR, Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula and the Fox Islands. Solid IFR for Atka Island westward to Shimianatu. And for the afternoon, we've got not too bad. Good VFR, northern Bering Sea, northern half of the Bering Sea, including the Pribilofs. All of interior Alaska. Marginal VFR, again, central eastern Kenai Peninsula, Kamishak, Kachemak Bay, eastern Kodiak Island, and Prince William Sound on up into southern Copper River Basin. But the eastern Copper River Basin from the North Gulf Coast Range on up to the southern slopes of the eastern Alaska Range, marginal VFR, and some IFR over the eastern Arctic coast, but not too bad VFR for the entire North Slope and western Arctic coast, as well as over toward Kaktovik. IFR from Nikolsky westward to Shimianatu in the southwest Bering Sea. And for the afternoon, or for Friday morning, IFR slipping on up into the southern panhandle, marginal VFR central southeast coast. Areas of marginal VFR south and east of the Alaska Range with some VFR thrown in. IFR southern Kodiak Island, IFR Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, and a more solid area of IFR from Unamak Island westward to Shimianatu in the southwest Bering Sea, and pick up in the IFR there along the Arctic coast pushing southward over the eastern North Slope at the northern interior, Pribilofs, most of the interior, VFR. For the afternoon, not much change, some marginal VFR into St. Paul and St. George, and from Nikolsky westward, IFR. IFR for the Arctic coast, marginal VFR southward over the eastern North Slope to the Brooks Range. Maybe Tuvik Pass, Arctic Village should be in the clear. Good VFR interior Alaska, end of IFR there coming northward out of the eastern Gulf right up to Yakutat, and the Panhandle marginal VFR east side of Kodiak, rather marginal. Shelikof Strait though, VFR. And for the passes, Tuvik, VFR with moisture coming down from the north. Look for conditions that deteriorate to marginal VFR throughout the afternoon, especially on the northern approach. That same pattern also for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR day coming up for the day Thursday, as well as rainy. Windy looking good, VFR, either entrance. Isabel, VFR becoming marginal as some moisture slips on up from the east-southeast, building convection. And Mentasta possibly going IFR in the afternoon. Tanita, VFR becoming marginal. And Portage, marginal VFR becoming IFR, especially on the eastern entrance. Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels coming southward, 2,000 feet up over the northeast part of the state, 6,000 feet into the Denali area, 8,000 feet over the southeast and eastern Bering Sea into the southwest interior, 6,000 over the Panhandle and the Aleutians. Icing, could be some isolated moderate rime icing into the central and southern southeast coast, the heavier stuff well to the south, and then some mixed icing. Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, Copper River Basin, up across eastern Alaska Range as far north as the Eagle area, and Glacier Mountains, otherwise icing free for the remainder of the state. Jet stream, kind of a sharp trough, a couple of lows aloft coming southward, the stronger one up over the eastern Brooks Range, weaker one there over the western Alaska Range. And you can see northerly 60-65 knots on the west side of that trough axis, southerly 60 knots to the east, southeast 70 coming into the southern Panhandle, light winds out west. 9,000 feet, 30-knot winds into the Arctic coast and just south of Kodiak Island, southeast 45 into Prince of Wales Island, and pretty strong winds, Dixon entrance, just clipping Prince of Wales Island out of the east and southeast at 3,000 feet, 20 to 35 knots from the Cape Lisburne area through the Bering Strait. Turbulence-wise, building considerable moderate chop moving into southern Prince of Wales Island, light to isolated moderate chop a little farther to the north. Also kind of bumpy for the northwest coast and the Bering Strait coast. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
When I first started working here in the early 90s, this is where the glacier was. I mean, where we're walking right now would have been a pile of gravel that had been pushed up by the glacier, and then we would have had 100 to 200 foot high cliffs of ice right here. And as you can see, that's changed quite a bit. And if you look at that in 2 dimensions, you can sort of see the terminus used to be here, now it's back there. That gives you one measure. What that kind of 2-dimensional look doesn't show is how much mass has been lost, that the glacier has just sort of deflated. These 200-foot cliffs of ice have disappeared and pulled back to this gentle sloping glacier you see now.
When I was working in Kenai Fjords National Park, I used the topographic maps to navigate where I was, and I realized that the mapping of the glaciers was really off. The glaciers had receded a lot. There were new rivers and lakes that were establishing where the ice used to be or should have been according to the maps. And so then I did a study on this and found out that we had a 5% loss of glacier ice mass in the Kenai Fjords area between 1950 and 1985. Big change.
You know, one of the most compelling things we do, though, to document glacier change is simply take photographs. We've had repeat photography projects here at the park. They may not give you the most accurate data in terms of how much mass or real specific measurements, but what they do give you is a visual representation that can't be argued with. I mean, it really requires no interpretation.
Understanding what's happening, understanding these processes, and possibly being able to predict what's going to happen in the future is the best that we can do, and that requires science and research.
There's considerable research on climate change in Alaska. The most significant, I would say right now, is the Natural Resources Inventory and Monitoring Program, which is looking at change across a wide variety of vital signs or indicators.
Kenai Fjords National Park is actually a pretty good representation of what's going on globally with regards to glacier ice retreat. There have been studies showing that mountain glaciers are retreating all over the planet. There are probably well over 90% of the glaciers are in retreat status. There are a few that are advancing, and some are holding their terminus point. But The Kenai Fjords, the tidewater glaciers are retreating more dramatically, but even the land-based glaciers in the terminus positions are retreating. It's pretty common for all the mountain glaciers. The big mountain glaciers in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, they're mostly in retreat too. We're really entering an interesting phase where what we call the cryosphere, the ice on the planet, is melting.
You know, in the more immediate past, it's clear that since the Pleistocene, glaciers have been retreating. So the idea that glaciers retreat is nothing, is no revelation. They've been retreating from across North America for the last 10,000 years. What appears to have changed and what has people's attention is the rate at which they're retreating. In the case of Exit Glacier, you know, we have scientists who've been looking at it. We have evidence that the glaciers left behind, where we can track that retreat for about the last 200 years. And we can say with confidence that in the last decade, that rate has increased.
Terminus mapping is a great way to map a small portion of the ice field. We come out twice a year and we use a GPS to walk the edge of the terminus and map the farthest extent of Exit Glacier. And that allows us to see what type of changes are occurring over the winter accumulation period and the summer ablation period. With that data, that can help us as we witness these changes within the ice field, we can hopefully be able to correlate that with the weather data that we have.
You know, when you look at an ice field that's 750 square miles, when you look at a glacier that towers hundreds of feet high, you get a sense of permanence. You think these things are massive, they're somehow a permanent sort of feature, and yet in a very short period of time, in a matter of a couple of decades, we've seen dramatic change in those things.
At Exit Glacier, we have a time-lapse camera set up on the glacier that allows us to take a couple photos every single day, and then to put that sequence of photos into a video where we can see changes of the glacier and the vegetation phenology throughout an entire year.
Virtually all the glaciers in Alaska are receding. Some glaciers are moving forward. That's not an indication that they're actually growing in size. It's just the rate at which they're slipping down the mountain.
In some cases, some of these glaciers are receding back up onto land, and so they're producing less ice. When you change the glacier systems, you're changing habitat for marine mammals and other wildlife. And the populations of harbor seals have dropped dramatically in the fjords. In 1980, shortly after the establishment of the park, in Island Bay, we had maybe 1,500 harbor seals. Nowadays, you know, it's a few hundred.
In Arctic environments, much of the sunlight that reaches the Earth bounces back because it hits snow and reflects off into space, or ice on the ocean and reflects off into space. That's the albedo effect. When the snow thaws and instead you have rock or vegetation, or when the ice thaws and you have transparent ocean, the sunlight will convert to other wavelengths that'll convert essentially to warmth. That does not bounce back into the atmosphere as much. So consequently, you get a warming of the ocean, you get a warming of the ground, you get a thawing of frozen soils or permafrost, you get a more rapid thawing of sea ice. So once the ice and once the snow is off of the surface, the rate of warming increases considerably.
If you're driving out to Exit Glacier, you'll actually start to see signs along the side of the road that have dates on them. Visitors sometimes are confused. They think they're elevations or something until they get up to the glacier and realize, oh, those were all date signs along the road that were telling me when the glacier was there. Another thing that's been happening in the Exit Glacier area in recent years is this flooding that comes at a time we're not used to. We're used to having maybe some flooding in the fall when we have a lot of heavy rain. This has suddenly been some flooding that's coming in the middle of the summer, usually not associated with precipitation events. It's associated with warmer weather and melting. When you walk down one of our trails that leads to Exit Glacier, there are a number of ways to get out there, but what used to be the main route is no longer really the main route because of the way the glacier has changed. So this main route to the glacier used to provide dramatic views of the glacier as you walk towards it. In fact, there was a large kiosk built at the end of this trail for people to stop and rest and enjoy the view of the glacier. Now, if they stop and rest at this kiosk, people think, why did the park put a kiosk here? Because it looks out at some shrubs. there's no glacier within view anymore.
The way we solve big problems like this is not all at once. There's a thing called the Sokolov's wedges, and you just take a little bite of the pie, one sliver at a time. So we try to do incremental changes.
When we talk to people about our concerns about climate change, about the changes that are happening to the glacier, we also want to leave them with some idea of what we're doing to mitigate some of the effects of climate change. For example, here at the park, as we retire vehicles out of our fleet, we try to replace them with electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. We've done things like at the Glacier Nature Center, helping to sort of experiment and install a cutting-edge fuel cell, as opposed to running some traditional power source out there that relies on some sort of more greenhouse-producing gas.
My main hope for the future is that people get the message that the planet is changing fairly rapidly in places, particularly places like Kenai Fjords National Park, and that it is, we think, there's good evidence it's a result of atmospheric changes, which are measured in terms of human inputs into the atmosphere.
The rapid rate at which these glaciers are changing now offers us the opportunity to talk about this place as a way of looking into the future. In a lot of parts of the country, climate change issues are a little more subtle, and we can point here and say, look how fast this is changing. This is what the future holds for perhaps a lot of us and a lot of the planet as climate continues to change.
I'm optimistic that people and nature will adapt to change, but my expectation is that change will occur. Time will tell.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Look for small craft advisories on the south coast tomorrow. From the east and southeast, 25 knots with 10-foot seas. And the north coast, east winds 20 to 25 knots, seas around 10 feet. Inside waters, Lynn Canal, south winds at 10 knots, Stevens Passage, north winds at 10 knots, and Clarence Strait, southeast winds at 20 knots. Outlook for the Friday time frame, small craft advisories all along the Panhandle coastline. Southeast 25 to 30 knots, except east southeast 25 knots on the north coast. Seas running 7 to 8 feet. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, winds will be southeast at 20 knots, southeast 15 knots for Stevens Passage in the central inside waters. Southern inner channels and Clarence Strait, southeast winds 20 knots with 6-foot seas. Prince William Sound, light variable winds with slight seas for the day Thursday. Eastern North Gulf Coast, winds will be east at 20 knots with seas at 9 feet. East winds 20 knots for the Barren Islands with 8-foot seas. And for southern Cook Inlet, look for southwest winds at 20 knots with 5-foot seas. Kamishak Bay, southeast at 15. And northern Cook Inlet, winds will be south at 15 knots. For the day Friday, Prince William Sound, winds will be southeast at 10 with 2-foot seas. East winds 15 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Western areas will be southwest at 15 down to the Barren Islands. Kamishak Bay, south winds 15 knots, and Cook Inlet, light southeast breeze at 10 knots with seas running 2 to 3 feet. Kodiak Island, northeast winds 15 knots with seas up to 8 feet. The Alaska Peninsula, west-northwest winds at 15 knots. And Bristol Bay, light northwest breeze at 10 knots with seas at 2 feet. And for Friday, west winds 15 knots for Bristol Bay, seas only 2 feet. And for the Alaska Peninsula, about the same forecast, west winds 15 knots. Kodiak Island, southwest winds 15 knots, seas up to 6 feet. On Alaska Island, west-northwest breeze tomorrow at 15 knots with 2 to 5-foot seas. Light variable winds for Unimak Island, 3 to 4-foot seas there, and variable winds at 5 to 15 knots with 3-foot seas for Adak and Atka, and light variable winds at 10 knots for Amchitka westward to Shimia. Light wind pattern continues into Friday for the Aleutians. Western areas from Atka Island westward to Shimia, variable winds at 10 knots. Unimak Island, variable to northwest at 15, and Unalaska Island, variable to west at 15 knots with 5-foot seas. For the southwest coast, north winds 20 knots for Thursday, seas 3 to 4 feet. North winds at 20 knots also for St. Matthew Island. North winds 15 for the Pribilofs, but small craft advisories for St. Lawrence Island. North winds sustained at 25 knots and seas up to 6 feet. And for the day Friday, small craft advisories St. Lawrence Island continue and extend southward along the Yukon Delta coast to Nunivak Island. All north 25 knots, seas 6 feet. Kuskokwim Delta coastline northwest at 20, St. Matthew Island north at 20, and the Pribilofs looking at northwest breeze at 15 knots. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast Thursday, west winds at 10 knots, northwest 15 on the central coast, north 15 for the western Arctic coast. Small craft or brisk wind advisories Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, north winds 25 knots, and small craft advisories Cape Thompson to Wales for north winds at 25 knots. And that pattern continues through Friday. 25-knot winds out of the north from Wales to Cape Beaufort. Seas in ice-free waters up to 5 feet. Western Arctic coast north winds at 20 knots. Central coast north at 15. And then east-northeast 10 to 15 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. For tonight, look for low clouds, fog, and some flurries. The temperatures in the 20s for the Arctic coast and the eastern North Slope. Otherwise dry over the interior, some scattered shower activity over the Nulato Hills or the mid-Yukon River there, lower Yukon River Valley. Nothing significant. Showers eastern Alaska range as a band of moisture moves into south central Alaska. Shower chances mainly over mountainous terrain. Rain and fog and drizzle, light over the Yakutat, and dry and light wind condition continues over the Aleutians and Bering Sea through tomorrow and Friday as well. Otherwise, for tomorrow, mostly cloudy with scattered showers and isolated to scattered thunderstorms over the mountainous terrain, especially the Copper River Basin up to the Alaska Range, Kenai Peninsula, scattered showers over the Panhandle, snow over the eastern and central Arctic coast trying to push into the North Slope. Amounts will be light, and then that pushes down to the Berks Range on Friday. Otherwise, showers over the Panhandle and south central Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.